is The World This Week, when a panel of journalists and myself go through the top stories of the past 7 days. Let me remind you of who they are. Anne-Elisabeth Moutet is from the Sunday Telegraph. Christopher Dickey is from Newsweek. He also writes for the Daily Beast. George Kazodias is a journalist at AITV. He's also a professor at the American University of Paris, while Patrick Vignal is the senior correspondent for the French service at Reuters. Good evening to you all. Thanks for being with us. Now, before the break, we were talking about the latest developments in the Eurozone, more negative growth figures and more signs that Greece is struggling to pay back its debts. Well, the latest corporate casualty of the downturn is the French car company Peugeot Citroën. Europe's second biggest car maker announced a first half loss of more than 800 million euros this week. That's double what analysts had forecast. The CEO, Philippe Varin, says his cost-cutting plan is PSA's only chance of survival. That, of course, involves thousands of layoffs. The government, though, says that is unacceptable and has other ideas. The government wants to give the car industry a boost via subsidies for electric cars. Here's the industry minister speaking earlier.
This is a plan which takes on the project of progressive change for our fellow citizens, for the French, for their way of life, and the evolution of their relationship with cars. This is a plan which brings a new industrial strategy by progressively reinventing the French car.
Patrick Vignal, what do you think of this initiative?
Well, the problem really is about an industrial policy during a crisis, because you have a government saying we must do this and this, and you have markets saying no, you can't. So it's very difficult. So, of course, you can talk about subsidies for electric cars and what have you, but it really looks very much like a smokescreen.
George Kazolias, you were talking before the break about the Germans. We shouldn't all be bashing the Germans. If you look at the German car maker Volkswagen, very different story there. They're about to come out with profits worth 6 billion euros for the same quarter, if you believe the analysts. It's a very different story there. Why are they doing so well and Peugeot are doing so badly?
The Germans have always been an export master around the world. But, it's interesting because Spain is also a big car manufacturer, and we forget that. I mean, Spain is not Greece. Spain has advanced technology. They're in computer sciences and IT, they're really very, very advanced. So it's a question of crisis. And if you're going to live in a capitalist system, you have to respect the rules. And the rules is Peugeot is a private company, and if they want to lay off 8,000 people, that's how it works in this system.
What about the labour laws here in France? There has been some talk this week that might be somewhat to blame.
Well, it depends whether we're talking about the labour laws or we're talking about the weight of payroll taxes, which is huge in France. For any of you who don't live in France, if you're paid a nominal 1,000, you get, at the end of the day, the employee, you get 780, and your boss has to pay 170, 1,700. So that's what we're talking about. It costs about double what people are actually being paid to employ a French worker. That's very high because we have lots of public services, we have very good health system and all sorts of things. That's the way it works. So the cost of labour is huge in France. Labour laws is something else. Labour laws are trying basically to say you can't fire anyone. They're all sorts of very complicated and very expertly designed.
And the 35-hour week.
There's also that. There's also the fact that whenever you want to have a sort of a wave of layoffs, then you've got to go through the rigmarole of series of hoops, administrative hoops. You've got to have this agreed at every level. You've got to announce them to the government. All of this is enshrined in law in France, and with the result that it's costly. But I would say that the cost of labour in Germany is not significantly. It's a bit less expensive than the cost of labour in France, and it wasn't for years. And still, the Germans have managed to get better. You were talking about Volkswagen. Volkswagen was doing extremely badly 10 years ago, so they've managed to sort of get themselves back into the race. And the question is, it's R&D and it's playing to your strengths. And Peugeot, strangely enough, was trying to play to its strength in a German way. You've got a mass car maker like Renault. Renault have been making cheap cars in places like Romania, in India, etc., in Morocco, and they are basic cars, entry-level cars. They're cheap to buy, they're cheap to manufacture. They don't make them in France. Peugeot had chosen not to do that, and they make good sort of middle-range cars and upmarket cars, and they're also a motorist. They sell motors to everyone for any kind of industry, from planes to electric salt cellars. And they do this with the same kind of quality that you find in the German industry. And so what they really want to do is they want to get rid of that factory in which every car that's being produced in that factory costs them money because they're small cars, and making a small car, making a big car more or less costs the same, except that you have higher margins with a big car.
Right, the profit margins.
So what they're actually trying to do is they're trying to bring an industrial solution to their problems. But if the government stops them, then they won't be able to do it, and they will sort of fall the way that other car makers have in the past, like who remembers Simca?
Is it damaging to business to have this level of state intervention? I mean, the government doesn't actually have a stake in Peugeot. It does have a stake in Renault, another car maker, but surely it should be up to the CEO and the shareholders what to do with the company.
Well, it should be, but I mean, I think when you've got the kind of labor problems that they've got here in France right now, and the kind of unemployment that they have in France right now, and you have a socialist government that's coming in that's promised to do something about the unemployment, and the first thing they get hit with, it's not really a surprise, is 8,000 layoffs at Peugeot. You know, they can't sit around and say, we're not going to do anything. And in the United States, after all, we had most of our... Detroit was about to go belly up. General Motors was about to die.
Not for the first time.
Not for the first time. The government intervened.
I should say Peugeot did get a state bailout of 3 billion
the government
euros.
intervened, and General Motors is doing well. The real problem with Peugeot and with French cars is that basically outside of France, people don't want them. I mean, you see a lot of Mercedes in Miami. You don't see any Peugeots. You don't see any Peugeots anywhere where there are a lot of rich people buying good cars, except in France. So I don't really see what the strategy is. There's a failure of marketing. There's a failure of design. There's a failure of research and development. And essentially what the labor unions are saying is, why should our people get screwed for that? Is that about labor laws, or is it about the failure of management? I think you can put a lot of blame on management.
Well, yeah, I mean, some serious blunders at the company. I mean, they failed to come up with a luxury model. I mean, the Audi at Volkswagen accounts for almost half of its sales. They also failed to do any business in China. They were extremely late to the game in China. I mean, this is where people are buying cars right now.
They were early in China. With Peugeot Citroën. Citroën were the first French car makers to go to China.
With the factories, they were a few years after Volkswagen. Volkswagen were there a good few years
I'm
before
talking about
them.
the French ones, but they were fairly. But it took them forever, and then you have to possibly put the finger on the fact that culturally the French find it very difficult to deal with a foreign culture, and it's entirely possible that they floundered in China because you have to take lots of things into account, including the fact that you need a local partner, and things did not work out, and you can't complain that it's difficult. That's just the price of doing business somewhere else.
Well, in any case, that was the bad luck of the workers, not the fault of the workers.
Right, quite. But I mean, this is a European-wide problem in a sense, isn't it, George? I mean, governments are subsidising industries to produce goods that no one's buying.
Well, yeah, I mean, if the money's not there, people can't buy. But I come back to the thing, the French are terrible at marketing. They've always been bad at marketing, you know, and I think it's had a lot to do because they've spent a lot of time protecting their own market. I mean, right down to the music and film industry where they tell radios how much foreign music they're allowed to play on their radio station or how many foreign films they're allowed to show on TV. You know, the French are extremely protectionist and have always been very, very bad at marketing. I don't see Europeans increasing their purchases in the near future. I mean, not with everything that's being announced, especially in France. I'm waiting to see how I'm going to get hit in my taxes next year. Like I said earlier, 40 billion euros Holland needs. So, you know.
And that's why this extra premium to buy electric cars is useless, because what it does is you're not going, what happens to the car you sell to buy a new car? That car is sold on the secondary market, so in the end you are taking sales from the industry anyway. It's just sort of making the money go around, that's all.
Patrick, why are the French so bad at marketing, and why are they so isolationist?
It's a good question. There's a problem in strategy in Peugeot's case, because Renault concentrated on cheap cars produced massively at low cost. And Peugeot maybe had the impression that on focusing more on luxury cars or on the higher sector, they could compete with German cars, and obviously it didn't work.
All right, finally then, let's move to our last topic of the night. The greatest show on earth has come to London. There's been a few teething problems, to say the least. The private security firm in charge of guarding the events admitted a few weeks before the games were beginning to start that they didn't have enough staff. Well, that meant soldiers who were supposed to be on leave following fighting the war in Afghanistan had to come back and fill the gap. There were then some serious red faces as organisers managed to mix up the flags for North and South Korea at a women's football match. And what about this? The Culture Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, who's already had something of a tough time following an inquiry into media ethics, managed to lose control of his bell.
Sure. Oh my goodness me, you're right. There we are. We did a terrible moment there. Health and safety, are you okay? Right, okay, there we are. Disaster averted. Thank you.
Well, the woman behind him might disagree, and that apparently was the sister of the CNN journalist Christiane Amanpour. Whoops. So, blunders aside, Anne-Elizabeth, it's going to be a big event tonight. 1 billion people set to tune in to watch the opening ceremony. Will you be one of them?
I will.
You'll be watching.
I will definitely. I think I'm with Boris Johnson on this one. I think that after all this travails and all this skepticism and everybody bashing the organisation, I think it will come together. It will be a great ceremony. It might really be a great games as well.
Are you going to the games?
I'm absolutely not going to the games because you've
Worried
got to
about
be,
the
the sister of a very important CNN journalist to get a ringside seat, obviously.
But we've just been talking about the economy, Christopher. I mean, the UK economy shrank by 0.7% last quarter. I mean, terrible slump there. Is this a good time to be hosting an event that costs £10 billion?
Yeah, sure. In terms
Yeah.
of, if you just look at GDP, it's a very good time to be doing that because it's pumping a lot of money into the economy, and it's doing it in places where it's distributed fairly widely. I mean, it's not like pumping it in by subsidizing the defense industry. Everybody's taking part in this, and if the games go well, that kind of optimism can carry over into positive economic consequences. So all that's to the good, I think.
All right, I'm not finding any cynicism over this side of the table. Is anyone else? Do you think the UK can pull it off? Do you think London can pull it off?
Oh yeah, I'm sure they can. I mean, forget about all the hiccups. I mean, you're going to have some, maybe traffic will be chaos, but it's chaos anyway in London. And the thing is, I mean, the guidelines set by the International Olympic Committee are so tight, and you have to follow them so strictly that once the games start, usually they go smoothly, and it can actually take place anywhere. It's like a giant circus, which is very well organised, and even visually it's similar. I mean, you would get the same stadiums. The Olympic parks are very similar. The villages look similar. And once the action starts, once the Olympic machine starts rolling, I mean, you could put them anywhere. You could put them on the moon, and it would work.
But do cities actually make money from these events? Because, I mean, I don't remember South Africa making a good deal of money from the World Cup. I mean, Barcelona, Athens didn't do particularly well after
Greece,
the Olympic Games.
But if you look at the World Cup in France, for instance, in '98, that really was a turning point. The fact that the French also won the World Cup that year created a sense of optimism where really you could see almost overnight, you could see a transformation in the national mood, and that affected the economy. So it can be positive, but as you say, it didn't help Greece very much.
Well, they made money in Los Angeles and they made money in Salt Lake City. Where
So sometimes
they
they do,
that's
sometimes
nowhere.
Los Angeles.
And they paid a lot of bribes
No.
to get it, too.
Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City was such a scandal. No, but I'm sure the games will come off very well. We'll see what it's like when the bill has to be paid afterwards, if Cameron's gamble pays off or not. I mean, you're right. The games in the past have not really shown to be extremely profitable. But I'm sure that the games themselves will go off.
But it's not Cameron's gamble. It's Boris Johnson's gamble. He was the
yeah,
one
Boris
who went
Johnson
to
has
fight.
a lot at
The
stake
mayor of
here.
London. He went to bat for it. I think when they first went to fight to get the games, Cameron was not even prime minister. It was still Gordon Brown.
No, it's Tony Blair.
It was even Tony Blair.
It was Tony Blair got the
Tony
games,
Blair.
yeah.
And they really pushed on, and the French felt so.
French totally fumbled it.
Yeah, they fumbled it. They said, "We are France. Paris is a beautiful city. Everybody loves Paris."
We don't need to market anything.
We don't need that. Exactly. And the whole team, I mean, they came with the diversity, the fact that London is a city with 32 languages and I don't know how many nationalities. And then they brought in the Queen's eldest daughter, who happens to be an Olympic champion, Princess Anne. And they really pulled out all the stops and they won.
And it's
Seb Coe,
amazing.
he pulled off a good bid.
It's amazing because just a year ago London was burning, right?
Yeah.
And we look at it now; it's a
like it
completely
wasn't last
different
year,
city.
I think The Economist put it quite well. They said the Olympics has turned from a celebration of a global city to a marketing pitch from an economy desperate for growth. I mean, that's That's what we saw yesterday, wasn't it? David Cameron was out there with his begging bowl and come and invest in London.
Yeah, and Mitt Romney didn't help him a lot.
No, he didn't help much at all. What was that about?
That's where the nowhere remark came from. And for those people who weren't following the headlines, is that after Mitt Romney suggested that maybe things weren't as organized by implication as he had made them in Salt Lake City when he was running the Olympic Committee there, the Olympic organization there, Cameron said Salt Lake City is nowhere. That's where that remark came from.
But he had provocation from Mitt to begin with.
Well, yeah, I know, Mitt.
Well, the other thing is apparently it will make the British more sporty. I don't know if I can see that happening
more
anytime
sporty?
soon. More sporty, because the big obesity epidemic across the
It'll make them
across
more
the channel. Make them-
spectatorly sporty.
Yes, well, right, but this is the argument of the government. They say, it'll encourage young people and everybody
Oh,
to get
yeah.
into sports. You inspired to take up a bit of sport when the Olympics is on?
To watch it, you mean?
To jog round to the pub and watch it,
Maybe
absolutely.
not too much.
I mean, you watch these people who look like they come from a different planet. I mean, they have trained all their lives and they can do things that 99.999% of the population cannot dream of achieving. So that's not what really gets you to be sportsman-like. But you find this beautiful. But it's like people at the opera or circus acrobats. It's not something you're going to do yourself.
You don't feel that you need to try it at home. All right. Well, thank you very much, Anne-Elizabeth Moutet, Christopher Dickey, George Kazolius, and Patrick Vignal. Thank you very much indeed to you all. Thank you to you for watching. That's it for The World this week. We'll be back on Monday with the France 24 debate. Stay watching. This is France 24.